last week it was announced that the first monkey-human hybrid embryos had been created in a lab. And a lot of people have been reacting to this, thinking there's something deeply problematic with it. And one thing you might say about what's problematic is that we're somehow playing God and messing with human embryos in this way. And I agree with that evaluation. I think that there is something right about saying that we're wrong to pursue this kind of research because it's a form of playing God. What I want to suggest to you today in this video is that that might be for different reasons than you initially thought. So let's dive in by reading a little bit from the Nature article that announced the first creation of these hybrids. So this is coming from Nature, nature.com. Scientists have successfully grown monkey embryos containing human cells for the first time. The latest milestone in a rapidly advancing field that has drawn ethical questions. In the work published on 15th of April, this is in 2021 in Cell, the team injected monkey embryos with human stem cells and watched them develop. They observed human and monkey cells divide and grow together in a dish with at least 3 embryos surviving to 19 days after fertilization. Skipping ahead just a bit, researchers hope that some human-animal hybrids, known as chimeras, could provide better models in which to test drugs and be used to grow human organs for transplants. Members of this research team were the first to show in 2019 that they could grow monkey embryos in a dish for up to 20 days after fertilization. In 2017, they reported a series of other hybrids. Pig embryos grown with human cells, cow embryos grown with human cells, and rat embryos grown with mouse cells. Now, as the article noted, a lot of people have reacted to this by thinking that something deeply wrong is going on with these kinds of experiments in this kind of research program. And what you might say is that it's wrong because we're somehow playing God. But what does it mean to say that we're playing God? I want to break down 2 different senses for you, one of which I think is the one that a lot of people mean. And I want to suggest that that one actually might not have quite as much traction in getting at what's ethically wrong about what's going on here. And I want to be clear, I think there is something ethically wrong going on here. But then I want to introduce another sense, maybe one that doesn't get talked about quite as much, but that I think may have more traction for sort of pinning down what exactly is so wrong about this kind of research. Here's the first sense in which you might think that the creation of monkey-human hybrid embryos is a form of playing God. You might think that it's playing God in that we're doing things that only God should be allowed to do. In trying to mess with embryos, in trying to direct life in that way, in trying to do something that clearly only God up until this point was able to do, we're playing God and we're overstepping and we're taking God's role. Now, I think there's some truth to that analysis, but I also think it gets tricky fairly quickly, and maybe not as much traction as it first appears to have. And here's why. In the Christian tradition, humans are created in the image of God. We have what theologians will call the imago Dei, that we are created in the image of God. And what that means is that human beings are unique in creation in being in some way like God. Now, precisely what way is a huge theological question. We're not going into it, get into it right now. But one of the ways in which you might think that we are created in the image of God is in our creativity. And think about that word in the very literal sense, our ability to create. So God is understood to be the creator of everything. But one way that you might think that we have the image of God as human beings is that we too are able to create. Unlike any other creature that we know about in the cosmos, human beings are able to create things. We write novels, we create art, we do all sorts of other creative activities that reflect exactly the way and reflect that God is a creator as well. We, along with God, are creators, and in that way, we share some of his image. We share in the imago Dei. Now, how does this create problems with that one idea of playing God? Well, when people initially talk about playing God, they start saying, we're doing the things that only God can and should do. And that's probably true. There are some things that only God can and should do. Only God can forgive sins. But on the flip side, doing things that only God can do is part of what makes humans human. Doing things that only God besides humans can do is precisely what we mean when we say that humans are created in the image of God. So, while I think there's something to this idea that we're doing something wrong by creating human monkey hybrids and that we're playing God, and what that means is that we're somehow taking up a role that only God should play. There's something to that, but I think there's also complications in that part of what it means to be human is to reflect God's image and to act in ways that only God acts. So, what's a better way of understanding the idea that we play God when we engage in research like this? Here's what I want to suggest to you. One way in which we might understand that we're playing God when we're pursuing research programs like creating monkey human hybrids is that we're messing with things that we don't fully understand. I'll say that one more time. What we do when we say that we're playing God and why we say that playing God is wrong is that we're messing with things that we don't fully understand. God is omniscient. One of the many omnis that get listed out when we talk about God's attributes is God is omnipresent and omnipotent, but God is also omniscient. God knows everything. And in that way, God is fundamentally different from you and I, and indeed from anyone carrying out a research program anywhere. Human beings have very limited knowledge in what they're doing, and limited knowledge in the effects of what they're doing, and limited knowledge in exactly what they're messing with when they go to mess with things. Now, sometimes this lack of knowledge can be an exciting thing. Sometimes we engage in a new project to learn something new. But sometimes I want to suggest that we step across an ethical boundary when we engage in research in which we don't fully understand exactly what it is that we're doing. And that is, to me, I think, what really is the problem with some of the research that's going on in messing with humans and messing with human development and these monkey human hybrids that are being reported right now. What we're doing is we're ultimately tinkering with a part of nature that we, in our limited knowledge, don't fully understand. And in that way, we're acting like we do understand, like we do know what we're doing, like we do know what the effects of this will be, like we do know exactly what it is we're messing with when we make these kinds of hybrids. And that is something that only God can do. Only God in his infinite wisdom knows exactly what it is that we're doing. So when we presume to act like we know what we're doing, that's when we, in that way, play God. In short, what I've tried to suggest here is that there is something wrong with this research that's going on. There is something wrong with the creation of monkey-human hybrids. And moreover, part of what's wrong, there's actually a whole bunch of other things that are wrong with it that we could go into in a different context. But I wanted to suggest that part of what's going wrong is that in pursuing that kind of research, we are playing God. But I wanted to suggest, by playing God, we shouldn't necessarily mean that we're just trying to do things that only God can do. That's part of the problem and maybe a big part of the problem, but it also gets messy because acting how God acts is part of us realizing our status as human beings created in the image of God. Rather, maybe what's really wrong and what really we should mean by when we say that we're playing God in acting in this way is that we're messing with things that we don't know. And in presuming to know what we're doing, we're stepping into God's role, a role in which, from God's perspective, while he would know everything, we in fact don't inhabit that role. And therefore, by pretending to inhabit that role, we play God. So that's one way of understanding this new research that's going on, and no doubt will continue to go on, and why I think there are some serious problems with it, and why we can understand those problems in terms of playing God.